precinct, which is the Havasupai tribe. It's at the base of the Grand Canyon. And so to access their voters, we bring all of our ballots and our voting equipment through a helicopter.
Really?
There's no way to access them other than helicopter, mule trains, or walking 10 miles down the Grand Canyon and 10 miles back up the Grand Canyon.
Wonderful. So Whitney, thank you so much for joining us for our thought leadership conversation today. So we'll just get started by kind of understanding a little bit about yourself, like what your journey, what got you, and you mentioned you lived in Chandler and now you're in Flagstaff. So how did that transition and how did you end up in election for local government? That's pretty, you are the first person I've met who actually deals with this day to day. So I would love to learn from you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Elections, I feel like, is a field that people just end up in by accident. I don't think there's no real degree for an elections administrator. And it's one of those fields that you get into and you find out very quickly if you love it or hate it. And it's very, very extreme if you love it or hate it, because it is not what most people imagine it to be. It's very meticulous and honestly kind of boring. So yeah, you either love it or you hate it. And it's really everything that we do is so apolitical. So if you have an interest in politics, elections is probably not your field, which is interesting, and most people don't really make that connection until they get into the field. But my background is actually in public health, so that's where I got my bachelor's degree. And I got my degree from Oregon State. So I was up in Oregon when I started my professional career in public health and worked for a local county there, Jackson County, Oregon. And then just a sequence of events happened where I ended up in Phoenix and was working for the Arizona Department of Health Services, managing their FDA grant for the state of Arizona. So I was helping with the state on that, but public health wasn't grabbing me in the way that I was hoping that it would after getting my degree. And so I've always had an interest in the management of elections. I grew up in California during the recall of Gray Davis, and Governor Schwarzenegger was elected. And so I was in middle school at that time. And so I like learning and seeing that of the petitioners and like the background process was really interesting to me to grow up in a time when that was happening. And so then I found an opportunity with the city of Phoenix that conducts their own elections. And that's how I started in elections. I just found a job that I was like, you know what, I've always had kind of an interest in like the less exciting part of the back end of politics. And that's how I started my career in elections, was 2019. And then from 2019 to today in 2024, elections has changed significantly. And so it's been really interesting to see the changes that have happened from 2019 to today, and to be a part of, what happens in Arizona and supporting our voters. And it's been a lift. And then I was at the city of Phoenix and ultimately moved up to be the deputy city of Phoenix over their elections department. And then I actually got recruited from Coconino County Elections Department to be the assistant director, which I accepted, and I've been here for a year now. So July 2024 will be my third election with Coconino.
What type of elections?
All of them. So we manage the federal, the state, the county, and the local. So the cities, towns, and the special districts, like fire districts. So the counties manage all of the elections for the state of Arizona.
And you mentioned that somebody who's interested in politics, election management is probably not a way to start. But like as me coming an outsider, I would probably think that is the best way to get into and understand. Like, why do you say that?
So because we are so apolitical, I mean, and I hear that a lot where people are like, I love politics, I think I love elections. And I don't think that's true. I think that we don't even talk about politics when we're conducting elections, and we train everybody not to have political conversations. So if that's what you're interested in and that's what you want to talk about, we don't even do that here. So it's not really going to be that exciting. We are so neutral, and everything is procedure driven and legally driven. We don't really make decisions. We just follow the rules. And so if you were thinking like, oh, I was going to make changes in the law, that's really not what we do. That's not it at all. We don't make any decisions really. We follow the Arizona state legislation and the elections procedures manual from the Secretary of State's office. So we're more procedural driven. If you wanted to change state laws, that's more working with state legislators.
What is involved in managing elections? So, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, like, pre-elections, during, and post. And what are those typical things involved that you think that residents don't think about when they see that, oh, there's an election with my city or my state that it's happening? Like, what are those things involved, and how do you manage those? Are these like different, or tools? One of the things you mentioned in your LinkedIn as well, that you also manage different type of tools and set up procedures, and you probably have a team that helps you out with those projects. Like, how do you manage the whole process? Because I can imagine there's a lot of things that you have to get it done.
There is, yeah. I think, and you're 100% right. I do have a team that helps make it possible, and I just have to say that the Coconino County elections team is an incredible group of people. And one of the biggest things about this field is it is a field of love and passion, because it is, as I mentioned, not really that exciting. You're following procedures that are very strictly outlined, and everything that we do is legally driven. And so we have to wear a lot of hats, and that gets really complicated when you're managing things. And 2024, for example, we have 3 really big elections. We really don't take vacation during an election year because we can't. It's just, there's no time. Our blackouts are so extreme. So you kind of lose and build your personal life around elections when you work in this field. And then we work extreme hours. So on election day, we will work 24 hours to get the ballots processed and collected from the voters, so that we can get those election results processed as quickly as possible. That's a lot of demand. So our work-life balance, very heavy work, especially in an election year. So I think that's really the biggest piece, is that the commitment to this job is very extreme. And then I also often hear that on off years, or when it's not election day, what are we doing? And I get that. I can see where you're like, I have my ballot, and like, what else are you doing? That's perfect. I think that we would really like it if people think that way, because that means that you had a really good, smooth voting experience, which is why we dedicate so much of our time and effort to ensuring that you're casting your ballot on election day. You're thinking like, what else are you doing? Perfect. That's great. But what else we're doing is that it takes a really long time to build that ballot for people. And so to get on the ballot, there's a lot of paperwork that they do with our office. There's a lot of education for the candidates or people doing initiative, referendum, and recalls. So there's a lot of education. There's a lot of paperwork that we're processing very early on. Then we have an election management system where we actually build the election. And so every election is different. The presidential preference election has very specific legal requirements around it that we have to familiarize ourselves with, because we only see them every 4 years. Right. So we re-educate ourselves on the election laws for specific elections before we run them. We input all of the data we collected during those petition filing to get the ballot put together. And then proofing the ballot takes weeks. It takes so long because there's so many different pieces. We have, for the July primary that's coming up, we have 789 different ballot styles. Wow. And so when we're proofing a ballot, we're looking at it not just 789 times, but 789 times 6 different types of proofing that we're looking at. We do rotations in Arizona. And so that means that none of our candidates will ever be at the top of the ballot 100% of the time. And so we have to make sure that the rotations that are legally outlined are reflected across all of our ballots. Rotation proofing is tough. That one, I just did it for July, and I was like dreaming about people's names on ballots for like a week afterwards. We like look at our propositions and reread them so many times that we memorize our ballots basically, and then we have to make sure that geographically the ballots we're expecting to go to the voters are being, aligned with their voter data. So there's a lot of background pieces that are just logistics of building a ballot. And then there's also Coconino County is the second largest geographical county in the country. So getting our ballots and our voting equipment to the voters on election day is an extreme lift. So we actually have one precinct, which is the Havasupai tribe that's at the base of the Grand Canyon. And so to access their voters, we bring all of our ballots and our voting equipment through helicopter.
Really?
There's no way to access them other than helicopter, mule trains, or walking 10 miles down the Grand Canyon and 10 miles back up the Grand Canyon.
With that equipment tag.
Yes.
Ability.
Yeah.
But it's amazing, like the stuff that is involved in the back end. And that's one of the things with the conversation I've been having with a lot of like city leaders is like, as residents or outsiders, if things are working smoothly, we don't even think about it twice.
Yeah.
And we don't even think like how much effort is involved in making this day-to-day life working. The only time we think about it is when something goes wrong. And then I'm guilty of that too. And then we want to complain about something. Hey, my street light is out. Or I went there to vote and the ballot wasn't on time. I have to wait an hour in line. Like these are minor things when you come across like what exactly has gone through to even come to that level. Like the example that you gave is like just to get the ballots and equipment to the county, you have to go find a helicopter. With the helicopter, even accommodate all the stuff that you're taking it down there. Then deliveries, like there's amazing stuff in logistics that is involved to get these things. And what will be your, I would say, like how do you manage this? Like there are like so many things involved. Are you using like certain tools? How do you meet with your team to make sure they're following the processes that are aligned and everybody's doing the task? And how do you handle the accountability and then keep them encouraged and motivated during this whole process? Because it's pretty much a year-round thing. Because one election ends, something else starts, then something else starts.
Yeah, for sure. Especially this year, we are basically for July. We're getting very, very much into the incredibly busy season. So July, we're tabulating ballots up until the canvass, which is August 9th. And then we have recounts in Arizona, and we, nothing's ever 100%, but there's a likelihood that we will have recounts for both elections, which means that we're recounting the ballots from July in late August. And then we have about 3 to 4 days, depending on when our logic and accuracy happens with the state for recounts, to finish recounting the July election. And then the very next weekend, we're basically building our GE ballot. And then our GE ballot is being built and proofed within like a 2-week period in order to meet the printing deadline and our UAPAVA deadline, which is when federal ballots go out. So our 2024 election is very tight in terms of the timelines of everything we're doing. And that the way to keep the team motivated is that we acknowledge it. I mean, that we're not going to say like we don't have a lot of work to build across. It takes a lot of planning with our team and transparency and communication with them. So for the month right after March was done and leading up to June was when a lot of people took time off. And it's because they knew that that's pretty much the only time this year that they're able to. Right. So by communicating early, which we provided this education in like November, December of 2023, that 2024 was going to look this way. We had all the blackout periods outlined for everybody for the vacation time off so that they were able to plan their 2024 well in advance and it's not a surprise. So I think that kind of helps. And then we also really do, wherever possible, encourage the work-life balance. It's really important to keep people happy, and you do that by taking a break and spending time with your family and remembering, our work is really important, but your personal life is too. And so we really support wherever possible taking, a Friday off to go just take a break and decompress. We have a really great support system here at Coconino County where our local mental health provider with the county actually comes in before and after every election with our team and kind of just does a support group to kind of talk about, you're about to go into an election. Here's some ways, elections are very unique. You're overseeing ballot processing. So you're in this room that doesn't have windows with a bunch of people that's very high stress and you can't leave. How do you take a mental break if you need one? So having those unique conversations with a mental health provider is really helpful for our team to kind of recognize when they're feeling burnt out and have some tools in their toolbox to process that and react to it appropriately. And then we do a post as well where we kind of decompress after everything and take a break. We also have a really great team because we like each other. So that makes a huge difference. We have, even if it's a birthday, like on election week, we try to set up some time to get together and just recognize that person's birthday. So we do events together as a team. We had a picnic together where we just all left the office, got out of it, spent some time together, just connecting as humans. And so I think that's really important to have that for motivation. And then what we do is really important. So there's just some motivation in doing this job itself. It's hugely rewarding to be on the other side of an election. I can't even tell you what that feeling feels like, to know that you made people's voices heard in one of the most important ways possible.
Right.
There's a lot of motivation with that. And in terms of like managing all of that, it's a lot. I mentioned that there's a lot of laws that we follow, and there's an elections procedures manual that's laid out, and then we have a lot of written procedures. So if I was to recommend anything to anybody, it's write down what you do. So that for us, we see it, and then we don't see it for another year or so, or 4 years, depending on what election we're doing. And so if we don't write it down, then we're relearning and taking that time every single time, and it's oftentimes we don't have.
Kind of last thing on those, I was talking about like the elephant in the room, and especially for election, like there's so much noise going with AI and artificial intelligence supposed to take off some of the tasks, or it's become like your quote unquote like a liaison to your day-to-day job. Like have your teams looking into something like that, or what are your 2 cents on, because government works in a very different way, right?
Yeah, and elections is even more extreme, especially when it comes to AI.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really interesting question for AI in elections. First and foremost, we're not there. There's no AI in elections. It can't be. It's just not. It's not something that the public's going to be comfortable with. It's not something that we have in Arizona legislation that allows us to do it, and it's not something that I, as manager, would be comfortable with without having the support of our Attorney General's office, of the Arizona Secretary of State, and our board and county manager at Coconino. So it's very delicate in terms of what we could and could not do with AI. We are definitely researching it, and we're aware of it. Our Secretary of State's office actually just won an award from the EAC for putting together an AI training for the election administrators of Arizona. And so Arizona is pretty well informed of the threats against elections with AI. And so it's nice that we have that background information of things to be aware of. We've taken some preventative measures that are state recommended by the Secretary of State's office. But in terms of implementing anything, I use like ChatGPT to write press releases, but beyond that, there's nothing that's going to touch elections. And I don't know that it ever will, to be honest, because some of our systems are certified by the federal government, and it's not even possible to interact with them. And we would never allow a third party to interact with them or to even have the information that is not publicly available with our systems. and give somebody access. So I think there's a lot of really strong protections that keep that separation from elections, not just with AI, but with everything. And so it wouldn't stop and change just with AI.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I think election is such a sensitive subject, and it affects millions of lives.
Yes.
And even if there's like 0.01% chance of something malfunction, that's not even acceptable statistics. On the
No,
it
it's
has to
not.
be, yeah. And there might be different ways, like you said, just proofreading your email or drafting like a memo, those kind of things you can potentially use that a little bit. But even then, that has to be like proofread and be careful.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That's what I've been like echoing from different sorts city managers that I talked to, like actually this week as well. Very similar mindset that has been echoing, and I totally get it.
Yeah. And when we had the Secretary of State's training, there was a panelist of AI experts that they brought in and we were able to have conversations with. And that was the consensus from even the AI experts that really one of the best things for elections is that we don't have to be first and we don't want to be. So yeah, that was it's pretty much when it comes to elections true across the board. AI is not going to be involved in it probably ever.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
Just as your closing remarks, and we started the conversation with that, like any young audience, one is who wants to involved in politics. You already mentioned that maybe this is not the right area to start with, but if somebody wants to be part of, like the back end of the system, that hey, I am more interested in operational side of things, so how it work. So, what will be your recommendation if somebody wants to start their career into that field?
So I have two suggestions. The first is to work as an elections board worker. And you don't have to be interested. I think that everybody should be an elections board worker at some point in their life, to be honest, just so you see what it's like to serve voters and you have that piece. And it's a matter of, something to be proud of to support democracy in that manner. So I think for anybody, if you're interested or not, but especially if you're interested, you should work.
How do you join that? How do you become an election board worker?
You can contact your county elections department. So they'll have their information online. For us, you could email us. It's elections@coconino.az.gov and just say that you're interested in being a board worker, and we'll help provide you the information on how to do so. Everybody gets trained before they get out there. So if you're thinking like, oh, I don't know, because I don't want to get just like, I don't know what I'm doing, that's okay. We've got you. We'll train you, and we build everything in mind with the fact that you are doing this really big lift on one day with only a couple of hours training. So we have manuals, we have procedures in place that we go over again and again to try to hands-on practice what you would be seeing, so you feel comfortable out there, because we want you to be successful. That's our goal.
And is there a minimum requirement? Like, can you be like a high schooler and be part of it?
You can, yeah. You can be 16.
16, okay.
That's the cutoff for the age. You can be 16.
Okay, perfect. I'm trying to get my nephew involved. I think he's just turned 13 yesterday, so it's good to know he has 3 years.
Yep, he's got 3 years. Yep. But yeah, that would be great. As soon as he's 16, he can contact if he's in Scottsdale, Maricopa County.
Yeah, he's in Scottsdale. It's like, typical 13-year-olds now, they started to have their own point of views around things. And I'm like, this is great, but let's do something about it.
Yeah.
So it's good to know. Yeah.
That is really exciting. The Arizona Governor's Office also has a youth leadership program if he's interested in government. So you might want to look into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the other piece that and again, especially if you're interested, but really just anybody can do, is to reach out to your elections department and say, I'd like to have some, I'm curious about what it looks like. Can I talk to you about it? Do an informal interview. Or, a lot of us do tours of our facility when we're not having live elections on them. So we open our doors so people can come in and kind of, elections are confusing. I think from 2020 to now, a lot of people have learned a lot about elections, which has been really, really interesting. I think if you asked somebody in 2019 what a canvass was, they would have no idea. I don't know that everybody knows what a canvass is now, but that's okay. More people than they did in 2019, which is wonderful. But there's a lot of information and a lot of unknowns in elections that we are absolutely transparent about. If you have questions, we just in general encourage people to reach out to us. And same thing if people are hearing things that are unsettling and they're like, what is this? You know, I heard that this incident happened somewhere. Contact us. We'll know for sure. I promise you what did or did not happen. 100% we know. And we're not afraid to shy away when there are obstacles that we run into. We'll tell the media, we'll tell the public. We don't keep secrets. We want people to know and feel comfortable casting a ballot. So we're trying as much as possible to be as transparent as possible. But that communications hat is new to us just in general, and also simultaneously to being as open and communicative as possible. We're still administering an election. So it can be a little bit challenging to juggle both at the same time, but we do our best.